Today's episode of the Winter Growers Podcast is brought to you by Growing for Market magazine. Which crops will pay back your investment in a hoop house or greenhouse? How does managing a greenhouse through the winter differ from summer growing? And which crops can just be overwintered in the field? Learn all that and more by subscribing to Growing for Market magazine. The writers are farmers, not journalists. They won't tell you how to grow, they'll tell you how they grow, so you can decide what works for your farm. Growing for Market is celebrating 30 years of helping local food and flower growers succeed with articles written by experienced farmers from around North America. Since 1992, Growing for Market is by farmers, for farmers. Plus, subscriptions start at only $30 per year. Whether you do farmers markets, local wholesaling, a CSA, or dream of starting a farm, check them out today at growingformarket.com. Request a free sample print or digital copy from their website, and podcast listeners can get a new subscriber discount of 25% off with the code WINTER when subscribing at growingformarket.com. I think Growing for Market magazine is an excellent and affordable resource for any grower. Today's show is also brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds.
Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud sponsor of the Winter Growers Podcast. Since 1973, Johnny's has supported farmers and gardeners with superior seeds, innovative tools, and pertinent information to help feed their families and communities and ensure their growing success. Our 40-acre research farm is the heart of Johnny's, where we trial thousands of varieties and tools every year. Our research team is dedicated to finding solutions to the ever-changing challenges growers face, including disease, environmental or insect pressures, and shifting market trends. We invite you to visit the Growers Library at johnnyseeds.com to find technical resources like the Winter Growing Guide, which has tips on planting and harvesting into the shortest days of the year. You can also find variety comparison charts, extensive Jang roller trial results, and more. The employee owners at Johnny's are working hard to make 2022 a great year, and we look forward to growing with you.
Welcome to the Winter Growers Podcast. Today, my guest is Danya Tietelbaum of Queen's Greens Farm in Amherst, Massachusetts. After over 10 years of year-round farming 50 acres in the Pioneer Valley, Danya and her partner, Matt Biskup, are transitioning the farm to winter-only production from November to May, specializing in spinach and salad greens in 3 acres of unheated high tunnels, and selling primarily to wholesale markets. The production scale of the farm is much more mechanized than most of the other farms featured on the show, but they can harvest up to 3,000 pounds of greens per week in a northeast winter, and the techniques and approach to their farm business are an excellent model for obtaining a sane work-life balance and still supplying much-needed locally grown produce during the winter months. I also love Danya's reflections on how a farm business can play such a vital role to a community, even selling wholesale at a larger scale. Danya is a wealth of knowledge and experience in winter growing, and she offers a lot of great insight and perspective. So welcome to the show, Danya.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you here today. I actually learned about your farm on Instagram, and you had posted in the spring about shifting to winter-only production. And another farmer friend of mine, Ryan of Riverside Farm, posted in the comments, he said, Clara, you need to reach out to Danya. And when I read your announcement, it was really fascinating to me because you started as a winter-only production, and then you grew quite large, and now you're shifting back again. So to me, that's really, really fascinating and exciting to hear that journey and that transition. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you.
Great.
And you know, we can get into all of like the whys of that transition and process. But first, I'd love to talk a little bit about your background and how you got into farming. Have you always wanted to farm? Did you have a, family garden growing up? Sort of what were the things that inspired you to become a farmer? And I'm just always really interested in that question because having grown up on a farm, it's a much different answer than someone who maybe didn't. So I'm really curious about your experiences.
Well, I definitely did not grow up farming. I grew up really young, mainly in New York City. I was lucky that even though I grew up in the city, we spent a ton of time in the Hudson Valley when I was a child and in the woods and gardening. And, my parents definitely thought, which I'm very grateful for, that it was really important to, have kids also like run wild in the woods and garden and figured out how to make that happen, even though we lived in the city. And I think from a very young age, I always really, looked forward to like the weekends and stuff when we would leave the city. And I always really connected with being outdoors. Went to high school in Vermont and started working on some vegetable farms at that time. And then I moved to the Pioneer Valley, to Amherst, Mass, where we farm today for college. And there's a rich farming community here, and kind of continued working on vegetable farms and learning. And just until we started Queen's Greens, to be honest, there was never a time when I was like, I'm going to be a farmer. I think I just connected with the work and just kind of kept doing it, even though, I went to college, I didn't study farming. I thought that I was probably going to go into some sort of health related field, which of course farming is, but I did think of it in more of a traditional sense. Kind of just my skills in farming kept growing and my interest in it kept growing, and just kind of stayed with it. And to be honest, even when we started Queen's Greens in 2010, at that time there was no like long-term plan. We were starting on rented high tunnels from other farms. It was very seat of the pants. Even then, there wasn't a moment where I was like, I'm going to be a farmer. It was just sort of like, I have this opportunity to explore winter growing, and I'm going to take it and see where it goes. And I think that kind of every step of the way, things have just kind of unfolded that way. And I don't know, sometime along the way, I guess I became a farmer. That's where we are now.
10 years later, you're like, oh,
here we are.
No, that's good. So what inspired then the winter growing part for you? Did you have an experience that led you to that, or what was your kind of draw to that?
I worked from, I would say, like between two different farms here in the valley. So for probably like 4 to 5 years on farms that were seasonal vegetable CSAs and had high tunnels that were used mainly for tomatoes and kind of other summer crops, and were just left in the winter, or maybe just sort of, threw some kale plants in, or, a couple things in to, maybe supplement some other stuff, or just for fun, like maybe to supplement, maybe 1 year to supplement like a little bit of a winter share, maybe another year just for fun. But the winter growing was never part of the business plan or taken seriously. And I was working for a friend on a farm here that there was a winter share for the CSA that was all storage crops with a small amount of greens. And I just kind of was curious to try to do more with the space. That makes sense. And he kind of let me run with it. So for 2 years, I believe, I kind of managed these winter high tunnels that previously weren't used heavily for winter growing, to try to, add value to this winter share that already existed. And that's kind of the challenge of that got me really interested in it. And it was pretty successful. And then in 2010, the first winter farmers markets opened up here. Prior to 2010, there wasn't like an easy outlet for small volume of winter produce. There was not a lot of winter growing happening here, and got an agreement from those two farmers that I previously kind of curious about their high tunnels in the winter to use them to try to grow greens for the market. That's how we started. And it was just 5 rented high tunnels at 2 different farms, plus about 1.5 acres of infield winter greens on also rented land that I had kind of under a bunch of low tunnels. We sold at the 3 farmers markets that all kind of simultaneously started that year in the valley. And it was a successful first winter. And then we just kept going from there. So.
Did you find that first winter selling at the farmers market, were you selling out, super popular? Were people a little skeptical? Like, how did that experience?
We were completely selling out.
Yeah.
Which, was in some ways wonderful, because it was like a huge confidence boost and just sort of this like naivete of like, sure, let's do that. And in other ways, like, of course, over a decade later being like, that was a real false sense of how easy it is sometimes to sell things. But it worked out. We definitely were selling out within the first hour or 2 of the market oftentimes. Like, it was pretty nuts sometimes. So
yeah. And then I'm sure that sort of, demand and enthusiasm probably informed your growth with the farm after that, right? So
absolutely.
So what did that look like for you? How did the farm continue to grow?
We did 2 years, 2 winters of rented tunnels and land. And then in 2012, we bought land. So I would say like that whole transition happened pretty rapidly because we were just like, had a lot of demand. So we bought the land where we are based now in 2012. And once we got here, we just started rapidly building high tunnels. And at that point, because they were, easier to put up and fast and all that, also a lot of caterpillar tunnels in addition, kind of those first handful of years. And started with winter 2012 on our farm. And then 2013 was our first field season, because we had started with winter greens from the beginning. They're still focused on greens. So we still grew mainly greens in the field season, which has stayed with us down the line as our business has changed to really just be focused on greens. But we also did grow diversity of some other vegetables. And the first couple years, 2013, 2014, 2015, we were focused on selling at mainly farmers markets and small wholesale to, small restaurants around here. And then we kind of kept expanding into exclusively wholesale. I think 2016 was our first year being like exclusively wholesale.
And how many acres was it by that point, like that you did the shift to exclusively wholesale?
Yeah, at that point, we had just acquired a big piece of land down the road for that season. And so that was a huge growth year for us. And at that point, we had the land base that we had, through last year at that point, which was our last field season. And so that was about 40 acres of field production, plus an increasing number of high tunnels every year.
It's always interesting to see, like, the start with the farmers market and the retail, and then the expansion obviously informs usually those marketing decisions. For you, was that a very deliberate choice, or did it just happen naturally based on the expansion?
I would say it happened very naturally. It was really just like our sales at the farmers markets we were at were, stable, but not very big. And we were interested in really just growing greens mainly. And there was a lot of wholesale opportunity that just was just available. So it just seemed like, markets were kind of at where we were going to be, like we had kind of reached the threshold, and there was just a lot of open doors in the wholesale realm at that moment that just felt very available for us to just like walk through, just very straightforward. And so we just did that. It just sort of felt like the path of least resistance, and it has worked very well for us to be wholesale focused. I think that the part that was deliberate in a sense is like that Matt and I we're really interested in focusing on greens, year-round greens, and obviously at a significantly larger scale in the field season. And I think when you want to focus on certain crops as opposed to growing a lot of everything, I think that I don't really see how to do that besides wholesale. I mean, I'm sure people are figuring it out if they want to through other paths, but it just seems like, at that point, CSA and things like that aren't really obvious choices. Like going to the market, you can't go to a farmer's market with only a streamlined group of items because there's a finite amount of shoppers. And if you want to make X amount of dollars, you have to have varieties that people buy more stuff, whereas in wholesale, you can say, we have this item, we have this amount, and you can just find all the customers in your region. It's not just oh, the people who happen to be walking at the market that day. It's anyone within our region, there's just fairly significant, is a potential customer. And so it just seemed like wholesale was the only way that we could kind of farm the way we wanted to farm. It has worked out, and our wholesale relationships are great. I never really thought this, but it seems like there's some myth that wholesale is impersonal or something. And I have found it to be quite the opposite. I have found it to be we have, stable and regular, wholesale relationships where we've developed very personal relationships with our customers. And it feels very much like small businesses supporting small businesses in our region, and very personal. And it's been lovely. It's not been a wholesale situation. It's been really nice. So.
Yeah, and you have quite a bit of diversity within the wholesale model too. So describe what that looks like. What are the avenues?
Oh my God, all of them, kind of. We sell direct to restaurants and stores in our very local region in the Pioneer Valley. So those places will just order directly from us and we deliver. We sell to a bunch of smaller distribution companies that kind of serve the greater region of our area. So our produce, gets into, New York and Boston and Providence and, kind of just the whole into Vermont and New Hampshire through different distribution partners. And I guess those distribution partners are both small distribution companies and also more food hub structured. We also sell direct to some universities in our region. There's a lot of colleges here, colleges and universities. So we sell to a couple of them direct.
So that's a lot of greens and a lot of produce on any given harvest day. What's the poundage you're harvesting?
Yeah. Well, we're now in this kind of looking towards this winter only new model. So I would say the past, to kind of divide that out scale wise, the past couple summers, field season, spring, summer, fall, we are harvesting from the field about, our average over the past couple years was 4,500 pounds a week, divided out over 4 days.
Wow.
And in the winter time, last winter and the winter before, where we're operating at the same amount of covered space these past 2 winters, our average was just over 2,000 pounds, 2,000, I'm looking at it right now, 2,300 pounds a week in the winter season. And we are currently building high tunnels to expand our winter space. And our goal this winter is to be at 3,000 pounds a week of greens for the 25-week season of winter. So 3,000 divided over 4 days, although it's usually not equally divided. So we usually have Tuesdays are huge. So I would say at least 1,500 of that on Tuesday and little bits the other day.
Wow. No, I mean, that's just, I want to emphasize like that's, 3,000 pounds of greens, not potatoes, for instance. Like that is a
Yes,
lot of greens.
it's a lot. And it's a lot because we don't also we don't use any supplemental heating or anything. Like it's all in-ground production. Like it's a lot, in my opinion, that I feel pretty confident that we're going to be able to harvest that much in the coldest parts of winter this year.
Yes. So obviously that sort of scale requires quite a bit of mechanization in your farming style. So I'm curious what equipment you rely on, sort of, what does that look like for you and be able to manage that scale?
Yeah, we are fairly mechanized. The fact that we are growing a significant amount of field greens for the past 10 years has dramatically influenced how we handle the high tunnels and has made us be able to really continue to scale up the high tunnels. Like this year we'll be at just over 3 acres of high tunnel space. And, that would not be possible to be hand harvesting that in my,
No way.
So we just kind of have taken the way we have been doing the field stuff over the years and just started trying to use as much of the same equipment as we can in the high tunnels. We run smaller tractors in the high tunnels than we did in the field, but we use the same harvester. We're, using the Ortomec 2000 harvester to cut all of our greens. We are using, the same bed shaper we used in the field, the Leshy bed shaper. We are using, in all of our larger tunnels, the same flame leader we used in the field to prep our beds. In our smaller high tunnels, we have to use a smaller flame leader. We're just using smaller discs and smaller tillage equipment because we have to be, using a small tractor. But we're trying to, my partner Matt has, really way more of the equipment person than I am. But, he's really just been working on kind of over the years, just trying to take what we do in the field and just either use the same piece of equipment on a smaller tractor or figure out how to kind of scale it down a little bit so that we could pull it with a smaller tractor. And part of that has also been as we've become more mechanized in the tunnels, we've taken away all of our end walls so we can, drive through all the tunnels, except for a couple tunnels that are older. Matt's gotten pretty good at just maneuvering through them. So
what about sowing? Are you doing direct seeding of all these greens?
Yes, everything's direct seeded. We're using a Sudden Junior seeder, so it's the same seeder we used in the field for greens.
And what are your bed widths? What are you sowing on?
In the tunnels we make them a tiny bit narrower so we can fit more easily, but it's basically like a 44 or so inch bed top.
And then what are the sizes of these tunnels too? I'm curious.
The majority of our tunnels are 200 feet long by 30 feet wide. We have some older tunnels that are smaller.
And are those single layer poly? Are they, who's the manufacturer?
Yes.
Yeah. Who manufactures them?
We have a bunch of older tunnels that are a collection of various manufacturers, and mainly a lot of them are used tunnels that we kind of just purchased here and there. And all of the tunnels that we've bought new that are 30 by 200 are all the Rimmel Nor'easter tunnel with extended ground posts, and they're single layer.
And all of them have no supplemental heating or lighting, right? Just
Correct.
pure. And what sort of ventilation do you have any active ventilation or is it all passive?
No, all passive ventilation. So roll up sides, roll up doors, because we got rid of our end wall and went to roll up doors. And so we can, between the sides and the doors, if we really want to vent them, we can really open it up.
Yeah.
Then we have basically vents in the peaks of the end walls, kind of where in a high-tech structure you would have peak vents cut in, kind of in the same location. We just have holes in the tunnels that we have like just a single wiggle wire track, and we have a piece of plastic that we can either, manually put over the hole or fold down to whatever height we want or have it completely off. And when it's completely off, we have it's a pretty big hole. It's almost 4 feet by 4 feet square. We keep those passively vented all winter, except for if there's an extreme weather situation coming through where it's going to get very cold. We might go through and manually, bring a ladder to every vent. It's very low tech and just wiggle wire it up. But we try to keep them at least partially open all winter because that's really our only venting. And then also, there's gaps between the baseboards and the floors, and we have roll-up doors, and even when if we wiggle wire them shut, we actually can't do the top, so there's passive venting there. There's a lot of passive venting just in the way the structures are built.
And what about inner row covers? Are you doing any covering inside as well during the winter?
We do inner row covers on the salad greens that we grow. We don't put any on the spinach.
Oh, I've got so many questions. So then with the spinach, I mean, all about harvesting. I'm so curious. I'm because, with the harvest schedule with spinach in the dead of winter, it's got to be somewhat thawed before you can actually harvest it. So how do you manage that harvest schedule in the dead of winter, especially without using any, supplemental heating or row covers? How does that work?
Yeah. Well, a bunch of flexibility, a lot of planning ahead, and I mean, being able to mechanically harvest. Before we started mechanically harvesting in the winter, one of the serious limiting factors on our ability to scale up winter was, and by mechanically harvesting, I mean with a full bed width tractor where you can just go significantly faster than with a farmer's friend or something, which are wonderful tools and we used them prior in the tunnels, but you're still moving comparatively slow. A huge factor for us was how much greens can we realistically be cutting with how many people at any given window that we have. And that was a huge factor for a bunch of years in our ability to think, oh yeah, we could be scaling up our winter greens production. Then once we kind of dialed in more into the system using the Ortomec 2000 through the tunnels, at that point, we are extremely flexible to harvest a ton of greens very quickly. When all systems are go, if we're defrosted and we have the tunnels that we're working in, open, and we have all of our bins stacked and the tractors running, just Matt and I together could harvest 800 pounds of greens in an hour.
And during that window of the sun has come out and you've got that, that brief window to get in there, right?
Totally. So, all the time, we're kind of, early morning, stacking bins, getting them at the back door of the barn, getting everything rolling. And then, we have the window and we go. And if if we have employees in the winter that do a ton of washing and packing of greens, because that's what needs to happen in our winter system with terms of the needing many hands work. If one of them is available to assist with the harvest, it can go even faster. But it just means that, if we have, if we're looking at the forecast and we're saying oh man, Monday, let's say, is going to be really cold, really cloudy, snowing all day, temp's not going to get above freezing, Matt and I can just run out together, on Sunday afternoon and just cut and have everything sitting in the harvest bins in the cooler when our crew shows up to work Monday morning, and they can start washing. So it has allowed us to stay low tech, to stay unheated, just by being able to harvest super fast when it's go time.
And give up a Sunday too.
Oh yeah, we know, but it's one of those things with the winter, we just know that we have to be watching the weather and ready to go at any moment. When the weather is right. And we do a lot of, because we want our employees, washroom team to have a pretty normal work schedule. And we also need to be able to, our customers are not flexible on when they receive greens. Those are hard and fast deadlines. The truck is going to be here at this time on this day. We have to get our stuff on, on our delivery route at this time. In the winter, we do a lot of kind of cutting ahead and just knowing that we always have greens in the cooler. And by ahead, I mean a day ahead, not like, so, if it's Monday and we're cutting greens, like we're going to be cutting for essentially everything that we think we're going to, if we can do it, a lot of what we need to be packing on Tuesday, we're cutting a day ahead.
Have you ever had a week though, where the weather has completely conspired against you and you have not been able to get in there without risking damaging the crop?
Very few in doing this. It has happened. Not in a number of years. We've had pretty mild winters the past number of years. I think last time that it got crazy cold to the point that like we could not, like we just had to shut down, was like in 2017. There was like a stretch. This past winter, we had a bunch of cold snaps, but they were all forecasted and we were able to just sort of work around it.
Yeah. I mean, I just know that that's one of the biggest challenges of winter harvesting, especially if you have all these wholesale accounts. From a small scale farm where you might be doing a farmer's market, you might be disappointing a few hundred customers that Saturday, but it's not the end of the world. It's a big blow, but it seems like with that sort of expectation, that makes it so much more stressful.
Oh, absolutely. It is a little nerve-wracking sometimes, but I think that there is. I mean, there's for sure a lot of expectation in our wholesale accounts, and a lot of. But I do think that because we've built a lot of solid relationships, there's some level of understanding of what we're doing and flexibility when needed, and I think that. Yeah. And I think that, in terms of even just kind of like, we do a lot of communication with our customers. So, I think that we're never in a situation where it's like, surprise, there's no greens. We're really, filling them in on what's happening. And, if we have a gap in being able to fill orders, whether it's for cold or just running out, like needing to wait for stuff to regrow or, whatever it is. We try to, let all our customers, give them some fair warning and communicate why. And I think what we're doing, with winter production and doing it without additional heat and light, and our customers are excited about that and they're on board with that. Most of the time it works out really well. If that wasn't true, then it would be a problem. So I feel like the small percentage of time that we kind of have some hiccups, we kind of explain it and works out. And I would say the customers who aren't so flexible we don't work with anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that has helped too.
Yeah. Well, I hope that, your larger scale operation has helped to educate a lot of these wholesale customers about what it means to grow greens in the winter, especially in the Northeast, because most people still don't really understand all those challenges.
Oh, they totally don't understand.
Yeah.
And I think in that sense, unless they really kind of put the effort in and the education in, or even when we were growing in the field season, like in the greens world, like all of the big greens labels, of course, are greens from many farms pooled together. And so any given farm, no matter what scale they're at, has all sorts of, hiccups in production, weather, disease, endless stuff. And I think that the wholesale customers don't know that because they're like, oh, well, I get greens from, this farm, but really that's a co-packer. And, there isn't that kind of just understanding built in of like, no, when you buy greens from us, you're buying from one farm. And we're not necessarily going to, get it 100 100% every single week of the year. And just trying to like build that understanding into what we're doing, but that most of the time you're going to get awesome greens and they're going to be way better. And then that usually works out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely a superior crop for sure. So winter spinach, there's unlike no other. California can't hold a candle to New England grown winter spinach. So
absolutely.
So what varieties then do you rely on for spinach? Does it change year to year, or do you have some tried and true favorites?
Well, I feel like anyone who has bought spinach seed over a number of years knows they keep changing.
Yep.
So I think the name of the game is to not rely on any particular varieties, and I think our goal is honestly always just to grow a ton of varieties. Spinach is like a very disease prone crop. I mean, all vegetables are. I just feel like, vegetables just get disease, unfortunately. And when you're asking, I feel like in the winter growing, when you're asking a spinach plant to stay healthy looking to the point of like, marketable, gorgeous leaf quality for a 6-month period over
from one
planting,
harvests, right? Or
from one planting in a high tunnel environment, which in the winter high tunnel environment is very disease prone. I mean, I feel like just the best defense is to just grow every variety we can get our hands on pretty much.
Yeah.
And just to kind of use that to hedge as many bets as possible and go for it. So I don't know. I just did our spinach order, honestly, a spinach seed order for winter yesterday, literally. I ordered 14 different varieties of spinach. So going for like the go big approach. And I'm always very aware of, looking at, all the spinach varieties have their, downy mildew, what races they're resistant to. And I always want to make sure that I have a mix, that I have no holes in that like, because some are going to be missing some that my varieties are missing as much different ones as possible so that, to have kind of as much protection that way. But, we also deal with diseases. Obviously, downy mildew is a big one, but cladosporium is also a really big one. And there's no, seeds aren't rated for kind of protection against that. So part of it is just sort of like, well, you could kind of like it all just feels to some degree like a bit of a gamble. So I just rather like grow more varieties, not gamble big on anything, like have, hopefully have great stuff. And if one variety goes down with disease, it's only going to be like a small percentage, and then we can till it under and replant.
Are these all hybrids though? Do you have any OPs, or are you just doing hybrids?
We're just doing all hybrids.
And what about with the arugula and the salad greens? Well, first of all, what percentage are you doing spinach in those tunnels, and then the salad greens and arugula?
It's roughly like 2/3 spinach, 1/3 salad greens for the fall planting. And then in our climate, the salad greens by late winter would all be bolting. So we have to flip the salad greens tunnels midwinter. And at the same time, if we have any spinach tunnels that are just like not looking good anymore, we roll those into that flip. And at that point, we plant both salad greens and arugula. So arugula for us is like an end of winter crop. And I would say, so we kind of, at that point, we usually are flipping about half of our tunnels. So we usually end up like towards the end of having, like more of those brassica crops comparatively.
Are you getting how many harvests are you getting off the spinach plantings per winter and compared to the other crops?
In the winter, we shoot for 3 spinach harvests off the spinach per planting, which we only plant spinach in the fall. So if everything goes well, we want to harvest each tunnel 3 times. The only thing that really has ever prevented that from happening is disease. And then if some things are like magical, maybe we get a 4th cut. But timing wise, it's usually like we're shooting for 3. And then the salad greens, we get more cuttings, which I shoot for 3 cuttings off the fall planting. And then we flip them and replant, and then we're cutting, in March and April off those, the second crop off the same beds. So, 4 or 5 cuts like per bed.
What's the timing for the spinach, for instance? What is your window for sowings? Do you have it through a large window of a month, or do you have it more specific dates?
No, we plant basically through the whole month of October.
Okay. And that's directly into the tunnels starting in October?
Yes. Yeah, we don't do any transplants. Our previous greenhouse is now an in-ground tunnel for growing. So every space we can grow in ground, we do.
So I guess also I'm curious about your fertility management with those tunnels. If you are, going exclusive winter only, are those tunnels and cover crops in the summer? What are you doing to keep that soil healthy?
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the many really exciting things for me in terms of going winter only is that we get to cover crop tunnels for the 6 months. We're planting crops, winter crops in them for 6 months of the year, and then they're off for 6 months of the year. So, between, we obviously need to, start making beds and stuff earlier than that. So we maybe have like a 5-month window of having them in cover crop. So this year we did oats and peas everywhere. And actually we're like in the process of tilling that under now. And we're hoping to put everything into buckwheat in the next few days. So we're having a quick buckwheat crop. And I think that in the tunnels, in the cover cropping in the tunnels is like a whole learning curve. This is because we have a bunch of tunnels. We've done some cover cropping in the tunnels in previous years. Like we always grew summer cash crops in the tunnels, but in recent years, not in all of them. So we have some experience over a number of years in cover cropping in tunnels, but this is our first year cover cropping all of the tunnels. And it is pretty wild. And to be honest, that's somewhere where we have a lot to learn. Cover crops grow very fast in the heat of the summer tunnels. And so just kind of dialing in, and then we can't operate, heavy tillage equipment to till them under because our big tractors can't fit in the tunnels. So just kind of dialing in the systems around that. Like we just had this heat wave recently. We're like, oh man, we got to get in these systems immediately. Because it just the conditions are just great for growing, as everyone knows, in the tunnels in the summer, and it kind of wanting to get them. I think it'll be a kind of an ongoing learning process to figure out how to get the most that biomass that we possibly can out of our summer cover cropping while still being able to incorporate it.
Yeah, and before it goes to seed too, right? Because it could go to seed so much faster in the summer. Yeah.
Oh, totally. I mean, and in that high tunnel environment in the summer, it's you just have seeds appear within a couple hours, everywhere. Not an exaggeration.
Yeah. So, and then what about, are you using compost? What other fertility management do you do?
I guess I'd say over time, we're really hoping our fertility management can be increasingly focused on just cover cropping in the tunnels because we'll have all that. I mean, all of the good growing months to grow the fertility for the winter is sort of where we hope all that management is going long term. We've been buying in some compost most years for some tunnels. So we've kind of have, every couple of years, some tunnels will get a little compost. We just put up a couple tunnels in May, and this year we're planning to just put some compost in the tunnels we just built. Kind of at this scale of it'd be hard for us to buy enough compost to be able to meet the needs. So we're kind of hoping to get there mainly with cover crops and then just sort of supplementing, picking a few tunnels every year that we think need a little extra boost and purchasing compost for them. And then we also, at planting time, when we're kind of making beds for planting, we put down organic chicken manure based granular fertilizer.
Hey, podcast listeners, we're going to pause for a moment to hear from one of our show sponsors. Today's show is also brought to you by Tunnel Vision Hoops. Tunnel Vision Hoops designs and manufactures do-it-yourself high tunnels, hoop houses, and greenhouses. With an extensive array of products to help large and small growers become more productive, they have 11 different tunnel widths to fit any application and designs to stand up to weather conditions from coast to coast. Tunnel Vision is also a national distributor of parts and accessories needed to build, maintain, or upgrade an existing tunnel or hoop house. Check out their Tunnel Vision Hoops YouTube channel for instructional how-to videos to help build a great high tunnel or hoop house. Here at Four Season Farm, we have 2 movable high tunnels made by Tunnel Vision Hoops, and they are definitely my favorites. To learn more, visit their website at tunnelvisionhoops.com. Now, back to the show. So, what about your employee? How many employees do you have? I mean, now that you're going to winter only, are you reducing that number? What is it looking like now for that?
Yeah. Well, at this exact moment that we're talking, wide open. So we, for the previous 10 years, we were really focused on farming year round and, really using the winter in a lot of ways to be able to retain our employees because we were operating at a bigger scale. Previously, we were providing employment year round, and we were really lucky in recent years to have a fair number of long-term employees, which makes everything easier. But we're now kind of going to a totally different model. So we're back in we're entering a seasonal employment model. So we have nobody working on the farm right now besides me and my partner, Matt. We will hire a seasonal crew to work early November through early May.
Will that be mostly like in the pack house, like washing, processing greens?
Definitely mostly in the pack house. That is the vast majority of work that needs to happen, in that season, because all of one thing that I really love about winter growing, there's a lot of things I love, but one thing I love is that a lot of the farming, happens ahead of the harvesting, like in kind of a different space and time. And except for like the moment when we're a couple of weeks when we're flipping beds midwinter. So, Matt and I are going to are doing all of the production now, and we'll continue to do all of the production, through the end of October. At that point, we'll have everything, planted and growing. And then where we start to need a bigger crew is when we start harvesting. And then we have a ton of, 3,000 pounds of greens a week, mainly going into small packaging that needs to be washed and packed and boxed and delivered. So a lot of the work on the farm is in this new model is washing and packing in the pack house and also driving routes. It's going to be a big percentage of delivery routes. And then sort of course, the occasional helping move remay and, all the various kind of occasional things.
Have you had to irrigate a little bit more as the winters have been getting warmer? Do you have any irrigation set up in the tunnels? What do you do about that?
We have overhead irrigation in all of the tunnels. A majority of the tunnels have a frost-free hydrant that comes up in the tunnel that overhead is connected to. But we do have maybe 6 tunnels that don't have that. So we're running lay flat to get above ground lay flat, to get to that tunnel. So that's a little bit less, which we do in the winter. We roll it up, we drain it, and then we unroll it when we need to water. So we have some tunnels that are not quite frost free in their setup, but certainly fairly easy to irrigate in the winter. We have 25 high tunnels. 23 of them are off a well system. And 2 of them are actually off, we irrigate out of a stream. So that's kind of field irrigation style with a pump. We're pumping out of the stream with a regular gas pump, running it through lay flat, and then it goes into overhead in the tunnels.
And is there obviously you have to water quite a bit in the fall, but once you get to December, are you seeing like a weekly need, a monthly need? What have you found?
I found it to be totally unpredictable. We're growing in ground in the natural earth, so a huge factor just seems to be like how wet it is outside. Like if we're like in a wet spell, there's a lot of moisture that's just coming in. I feel like with the high tunnel growing, we're both separate from we're somewhat insulated from certain aspects of the environment, but we're also, in this low tech in ground thing. And we're, these are just covered sections of the field. We're completely connected to what's happening outside. So, when it's wetter, we tend to we could go, a month without irrigating and just having kind of just enough ground moisture being wicked kind of through the soil. If it's dry-ish, I like to irrigate after we harvest a tunnel. We basically harvest like a whole tunnel at a time. And I like to be able to kind of cut that water for a little bit to kind of, send it on its way for, a good regrowth. But if it's real wet or real cloudy, we won't.
And I'm sure that just is going to increase any mildew issues or
Totally.
Yeah, which is always a tricky balance to play in the winter.
Yes, such a tricky balance.
What about, do you ever get any flushes of aphids in the spring when things start quickly growing again and, water demands go up, but it's hard to sort of figure out how to balance all of that?
We've been pretty lucky on the aphid front. I hope that continues.
Okay. Yeah. No, you must be doing something right. I mean, some of it is, like for us, we have a lot of crops that are in ground for, it could be end of September all the way through to April. And
I was going to say, we kind of shorten it. We're kind of planting a little colder.
Yeah.
And we're ending our high tunnel season like April 30th, first day or two of May. I think if we were to kind of be taking, I feel like there were a couple of years in the past we were taking some high tunnel spinach deeper into May because it looked good. Maybe we're colder in the field and like those crops we sometimes got aphids in. But it seems like when we just really keep our tight 6 months or even 6 months minus a week or two season on winter, we seem to have, at least historically, not any aphid problems.
So I guess I want to sort of circle back to that original question of, why shifting now back to winter only? I can make some sort of guesses from what I've heard from you, but, things such as you have the summer months to really focus on cover cropping and fertility and a certain break. And then you have enough of these established markets and demand in the winter and probably higher, net profit margin as well. Are those kind of the primary reasons, or what would you say for you has informed this decision?
There's a lot of factors. I mean, this for us is it's a big move to shut the farm down for the time of year that is considered the growing season where we are. So, there's a lot of factors that come into play in terms of us doing this. And I think some big ones are, we kept expanding what we are doing in the winter year after year to the point where we're just doing a lot in the winter. And that winter, even though we were a year-round business for a number of years, we still kind of thought of winter as the rest season. But the past couple years, it's been extremely busy and really hasn't been a rest season, and really wanting to build into our model a downtime. And when we kind of, were to step back and look at what we were doing, the winter is, if we were to kind of be okay, we're pretty much year round. We want to pick a downtime. The summer is definitely the one for us to pick. What we do in the winter is really exciting for us. It's obviously, we have a lot of infrastructure invested in it, and it's, it's a way bigger need in our community. People really, there's very little, availability of fresh greens in the winter comparatively to the summer. And, there's massive demand and it fills a really big need in our region. And it seems like, there's a lot of room for growth there while still keeping it to kind of a 6-month harvest season in the winter half of the year, all of which gives us, I hope, way more down the line of like a ability to kind of do some other stuff with some of our time as opposed to just farming, even though we love it.
Time off for farmers. What a concept,
yeah.
Right?
And of course, because we're farming and we're running a business, I would say like this summer is operating in a way different pace than normal summer. But of course, we're running a business. We're never off. But it's been really nice to, have some downtime, to spend more time with our son, to, be more present parents and, doing more hobbies, more things that like we just haven't been able to, put any time into, and working probably this summer what many people would consider a normal amount of hours in a work week for the farm, because there's still a lot of stuff to do. But being able to balance that, and greens production allows for no flexibility. It's like the production and harvest schedule is just all timing, and to be able to have like some flexibility in our work schedule, it's a very nice mental break.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's exciting. I'd love to, revisit this conversation a year from now and see how this transition is going and
Totally, because I'm always like, yes, but the other thing is like, I think this is going great, but I'm always like, talk to you in 5 years. I think a big part of it too, which I will also just say kind of, because I did just focus on the personal part. There's also a business component to this, which is like, we strongly believe this is going to be a very successful business to just focus on winter. I think in a lot of ways it has the potential to be much more successful for us in our particular circumstances, in our particular situation as a business than going year round, in addition to kind of personally. So
yeah, no. And I mean, honestly, I there needs to be more examples and more models of what you're doing, because the demand and the need for greens in the winter is so high, but there's so little production, even though the infrastructure and probably the upfront cost is so great to begin with. Right.
But I think it is for other types of farming too. So
yeah,
I don't know if it's particularly more so for winter in a lot of ways, but
yeah, no,
you can operate, you can do a lot with a lot less land in the winter. So you need infrastructure, but you really don't comparatively. You need less land, so it's hard to know which is more of a barrier sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, well, because 3 acres of undercover versus 50 acres of field, right? Isn't that
exactly?
Yeah. So
and we're doing like 3,000 pounds a week in the winter off of 3 acres of tunnels versus like 4,500 pounds off of like having 50 acres. In greens, it's like it's just I just think everything is different, and it's just totally different equations across the board, and so
yeah. Well, it's super exciting, and I look forward to following your journey with this. So, well, I'd love to shift now into the lightning round questions. So, number 1, what is the hardest part of farming?
Always being on, always being ready for whatever's about to happen. Kind of just knowing that an endless number of things that I'm responsible for could need attention at any moment.
And how would you say you mitigate that challenge for you?
Maybe by going to winter only to have a little bit of a slowdown in the summertime.
Good answer. Okay, next, what is your favorite crop to grow, cook, and eat?
Well, my favorite crop to grow is spinach, because it's the majority of what we do. So it's very important to us, and it's an extremely challenging crop, and where I just always have so much more to learn every day about it. So I don't know. Fresh corn is out now. We've never grown corn. I love eating it. I've been eating so much corn the past 2 days. That might be my favorite crop to eat. But so far from anything we do. Winter spinach is probably a close second because nothing beats that. But except for maybe corn in early July.
I know, right? Fresh off the cob, no cooking required.
So
right?
Good.
Yeah. What gets you up in the morning?
My alarm clock, a bunch of coffee.
Nothing, no other like driving voice inside.
That comes in later in the day for
me. What's your favorite tool?
Our tractor mounted greens harvester, the Ortomec 2000.
And just out of curiosity, what does that cost?
That's a great question. I don't know what it costs now. We actually have 2 of them, and we got it different years, and we did pay kind of different amounts for them. And I think it's like in the ballpark of like $20,000-ish.
Okay. And is it come in different widths? Do you adjust the width?
Yes.
Okay.
It comes in different widths.
But it's like the creme de la creme of harvesters, right?
I mean, the Ortomec 2000 is like the smallest tractor mounted greens harvester you can buy, to my knowledge. So like it is like in the world of greens harvesters, it's like the tiny one.
Yeah, right. But for mid-size farm, yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, there's certainly some farms that are mid-size farms that are operating a bigger machine than this. And it's also like, a lot of those like kind of creme de la creme ones are like this, just like it's a tractor implement. It hooks to a tractor as opposed to being like a self-propelled machine.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean,
it's awesome.
It's
incredible.
I've seen videos of it, and it looks like a dream to operate and to use. So yeah. What is your learning edge? Where do you feel like your abilities or understandings as a farmer could grow?
A lot of where I want to learn right now is detailed, like nitty gritty production stuff. I think that, as we've become more and more specialized and now have made like a leap to being even specialized in a more extreme way within just doing greens, we're going year-round greens to like just winter greens and really only growing 3 types of greens in the winter. That, at that point being beyond well-versed, in the extreme details of every crop that we grow and every vulnerability and every dynamic of every disease and the dynamic of, all the different chemicals that are available to us and how they can, interact with that disease and, the details of like, I feel like every variety that's out there. And, if making sure I've tried them all. And if I haven't, I need to order it and trial it. And, it just seems like there's not a lot of room. There's no room for us to have kind of, there's not a lot of leeway for production errors in where we are right now with our business. So just trying to, understand everything as deeply as I can, understand more and more about soil science, understand more and more about soil science, especially in the high tunnel environment, which is different. We've been doing these things for 12 years, but I just feel like as we've really streamlined our business down, like the production stakes have just really been raised on a lot of levels, and just trying to, we keep learning like everything we can possibly learn about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, never ending.
Never ending. And it's truly never ending what we can learn. So that's ongoing. I also think, another, learning thing that I'm less focused on right now, in the summertime, I'm more focused on learning is that we're going to a really different employment model on our farm than where we've been. So trying to like kind of revisit, a lot of, how we want to lead on our farm, like what we want, all of these, dynamics to look like. I think that we were so lucky for so many years to have a lot of employees who had been with us for a long time. Then you get into certain rhythms of ways of being on the farm and ways of leading and ways of interacting, with our team and having, our team having, certain dynamics of how they interact with each other. And we're about to kind of, hopefully we'll have some of those people come back for us in the winter. But even if that happens, it's going to open up, in some ways, a totally just new chapter on what it means to work at Queen's Greens and what it means for us to like lead a team, in this totally different way. So we have a lot to like process and learn and create about what that looks like in this next chapter. Cause, working here is going to definitely look very different in the winter than it did in a year-round operation.
Yeah. How do you relate to that which is out of your control?
As briefly as possible. So I think part of the process of, in my opinion, the essential part of being a good farm manager, which I strive to be all the time, is like understanding that there's so many things that happen that are out of our control. And there's so many things that are in our control, and to like figure out, like be able to like figure out really quickly, like what's what on that, and like just focus on the ones that, just focus on the areas that we are in control, and just to kind of let the stuff that's out of our control happen, and not dwell on it, too much. I think a lot we've been, I'm sure you're in this weather system right now with like, it's just been raining and raining and raining. And I've been, to be honest, pretty grateful in all this rain right now that we're not trying to harvest thousands and thousands of pounds of greens from the fields right now. But, it, like something like that, you can't control, and that similar things happen in winter production, whereas like you can't control how much it rains, and just kind of acknowledging that. But like in the moment, like you can have some influence, you can help your customers, understand what's happening in the most positive light possible, like you can, like if you're not able to harvest stuff, you can like influence, the morale around it on the farm, you can, like, there's so many things like within that are possible to have influence over.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is, this conversation is happening in July, and it's been rainy and humid and wet,
Yes.
right after a week of heat. Yeah. And that was, this is just following a week of heat, like really excessive heat. So yeah, you never know what you're going to get. And yeah, it's hard to let it go still. What's one piece of advice you wish you had started out, or something you wish you had done differently?
That's a huge question. I think, in terms of us going to like winter only right now, and especially for the people who've known us and known our business for a long time, and who kind of like knew that we were winter only, and then like, did this whole huge expansion and field production and are now like winter only again. I feel like there's so many people who have been like, basically like, do you regret, scaling up in the field? And I just feel like I just tend to like not think of things that way. Like, I don't at all regret that. I feel like we had an incredible, 10-year run as a year-round business. As I said, our ability to scale up in the winter was 100% influenced on growing greens in the field and looking at the systems and figuring out how to like bring that into the tunnels. And, like I just like, well, this is how it unfolded. And like, that's fine. So I think that like, I do think that like kind of things unfold in a way that, as long as like we're open to the learning in it and like gleaning the good lessons from things, is like generally like a beneficial way for things to unfold. I also think that like, I don't know, I think like in a nutshell, I think the undervalued I guess I'd probably give someone advice, but I feel like most people who want to start a farm are usually pretty headstrong and don't really want to listen to advice.
Exactly, right?
But I would maybe, like, I think that a lot of I think in our kind of culture and thinking about farming, a lot of the undervalued skills in that realm are incredibly important. So, like, sure, it's important to know, like, the mechanics of farming, but it's, to run a successful business, which are all things that, of course, I'm still working on. It's more important, in my opinion, to, like, be a good problem solver, to be able to think on your feet really well, to be a good team leader, to be a good communicator, to be really great with customer service and whatever that means, like in your own way, to be able to, like, state clear goals and figure out how to meet them. Like, kind of all these things that are just, there's a ton of people running very successful farm businesses that are not necessarily, like, incredible at the mechanics of farming, and vice versa. There are people who are incredible at the mechanics of farming who have not been able to, like, bring it together to be, like, a successful business in the way that, it needs to be. And I just think that, like, I've been trying to put some more focus on kind of, like, all these kind of, like, what it means to be a good business things. And I think if I was, and if a lot of people I know were more focused on what that from day one, I think that this kind of small farms could be, like, in general, in a way better place. I feel like the people who kind of dialed in thinking of, like, themselves as, like, both as a farmer and a leader of a complex organization, a complex business, from day one, are people who have been really successful.
Yeah. What do you love besides farming?
I love being a mom. I love, as I said, eating and cooking. And I love, which I've been trying to do a little bit here and there this summer, just spending some time outdoors. That is not necessarily farming, just spending some time outside, enjoying being outdoors. So, and getting to do that with my son as much as possible. He's going to be 3 next month. And
do you feel like there's a future farmer there in the making, or do you, like, what, I don't know, as a mom, as a parent, what visions and hopes do you have for your son?
I think he'll be a future farmer if it's kind of what speaks to him long term. I don't have any particular hopes in that sense for him. I think I was lucky enough to be raised by parents who similarly didn't, like, put, specific hopes or visions on me for the future. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be farming. And I think that I hope that he really continues. Right now, I know he loves growing up on the farm, and I truly hope that he continues to love growing up on the farm and gets involved in different aspects of the farm over the years. Because I think that, I don't know, like, I think it's just amazing in some ways that he could just kind of see what we're doing all day. I think that that's something that, a lot of people and who don't grow up farming, or kind of don't grow up in a way where they're kind of seeing their parents work. I think that that's something that's really missing, like, I guess in a lot of ways that I think is really beneficial to kids. And I love that he's excited about work because he sees us working, and he likes helping, and I think that all of that is, like, really beautiful. And if I guess my goal is that, like, the farm continues to be a really positive and great space for him to grow up and learn on. And if it ends up being part of his future beyond his childhood, awesome. And if it not, I think that, like, the skills, I mean, even as, like, not even a 3-year-old, he knows so much from growing up on the farm that I feel like, like he knows how to use a lot of tools. He knows how to steer a tractor. Like he's so little, and he feels, and he has a lot of confidence in these things. And I think that like ultimately, like that's my goal in terms of raising him on the farm, is like that, whatever he does with his life after, I imagine that these things will serve him really well as long as we keep making the farm a positive spot for him to be, which is my goal, I guess, within that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I always like to say that I grew up learning farming through osmosis. So it sounds like he is growing up learning farming through osmosis. So
totally.
And last question, how will you grow old farming?
I think that I hope that us moving to winter only is a very sustainable life choice. That means that we can do this till we're very old, because that is my goal. To be doing this for a long time. I think growing in the year-round model, I think that it would be hard for me to sit here and say, I feel like I can do this for, long term. I'm hoping that with going to winter only, that feels super possible. I think on a personal level, which has also been helpful with winter only scheme, just trying to like facilitate some like more just like fulfilling personal things like around the farm and including the farm. So, even just like really little things. I started going to like yoga class again because we shut down in the summer, and all of a sudden I was able to squeak that in here and there. And it's been super beneficial. And, just trying to like live a more balanced and like fulfilling life, I think will facilitate us doing this long term on a personal level, which I think we're making some really great strides to do right now. I think on a community level, which for me is like an incredibly important piece in the how do we do this for the rest of our lives, is like our farm very much does not exist in a vacuum. We are, we're part of a really great farming community. We are part of a really great community of collaborators who are customers, to people we share trucking routes with, to, all these kind of other farms that we kind of have different things going on with and different relationships with. And I just think that as long as we can kind of keep kind of investing in and participating in and growing kind of all these intersecting things that kind of create the community that supports what we're doing, we'll be able to do this long term, because that's what makes it feel not only like fun, because so we're not just feeling like an island, we're feeling connected to this bigger thing, but also valuable what we're doing, to be connected into people who really want to be part of in different ways what we're doing.
Well, thank you so much, Danya. This has been a real pleasure speaking with you. I just had so many questions. I barely feel like I sort of got to all of them in our time frame, but it really, you are such a wealth of knowledge and information and experience, and I'm really excited to see where your farm goes from here. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Today's show was produced by me, Clara Coleman, with support from No-Till Growers. Special thank you to Willie Breeding for the theme music. Thank you to the patrons at patreon.com/no-till-growers for helping to make this show possible. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week. Hey, podcast listeners, just a quick note about an upcoming free high tunnel workshop in November you might be interested in attending. For those listeners in Iowa and neighboring states, Iowa State University Extension is hosting its annual High Tunnel Short Course on Monday, November 8th, 2021 from 8:30 until 3:30. Participants will hear experienced grower presenters talk about honing their winter growing systems, producing earlier summer fruits, and growing cut flowers in tunnels, as well as the latest research on cucumber grafting for increased production. Speaking this year are Liz Graznick of Happy Hollow Farm in Missouri, John Dindia from Lakeview Hill Farm in Michigan, Ann and Eric Frasenberg from Pheasant Run Farm in Iowa, and Dr. Guan from Purdue University. It's free to attend, but registration is required by October 31st. Find the registration link at extension.iastate.edu/vegetable lab or call Dan Filius at 515-957-5760 for more info. They hope to see you there.